Talk Live.
Welcome to Free Talk Cast, the podcast where we talk about things from the perspective of peace and freedom. And today with you in the studio, it's Aria.
And Nikki.
And I, of course, want to say thank you to Damon Freeman, that is tonight's supporter. That is this week's supporter, rather. Each week we give a shout out to one of our supporters over on Patreon. You can find that at patreon.com/LRNFM. Again, that's patreon.com/LRNFM. Thank you so much, Damon Freeman, for your support. Thank you for sitting down with me this week, Nikki. It's actually been a bit hectic for me. My boyfriend, of course, is in the hospital right now, and I've spent most of the last 2 days there with him. It's nothing overly serious. It's nothing life-threatening, but it is something that one has to be hospitalized for. It's pancreatitis for anyone out there who's curious about it, but he doesn't drink. And this was, I knew nothing about pancreatitis prior to Sunday night when he went to the hospital. And everything I found out about it since is suggested it's almost entirely linked to alcoholism. Like, that's the number one cause everywhere I look. So when the doctor asked him how much he drinks, and my boyfriend answered, "I don't drink," I totally understand it now, why the doctor was skeptical of that answer. And based on my research online, if I didn't spend so much time with this guy, like 3 nights a week, he stays over here at my house, I would know if he had a drinking problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
But if that wasn't the case, based on everything I've seen online, I would be wondering if this guy had a secret drinking problem. But it turns out to be because he had been taking too much ibuprofen. So he's going to be fine. They just have him on IV fluids and on a clear diet, which is absolutely terrible because he basically gets to eat ice chips and Jell-O. As far as I can tell, yeah. I'm taking him a coffee later, but it has to be just
no milk.
Straight black. Yeah. Very uncomfortable, very miserable thing. Of course, good for him. He's declined any narcotics. So he's just taking, it's not ibuprofen. It's, the nurse described it as a step
Toradol, probably.
No, it starts with a K.
That I forget what the generic name is. But.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of it prior to this, but good on him for turning down painkillers because, as he said, he likes them too much. Same reason that I would turn them down in most cases if the doctors were just trying to prescribe them and I didn't need them. But Nikki, you had said something a few weeks ago, or I guess it was actually last week. I don't know. It's been a really busy week for me, so things have sort of bled together. And it was in front of me, and now it isn't. But it was about how you would change your perspective on life and things that happened to you from essentially, why did this happen to me, to instead looking at it as, how is this for me?
I like to think of it as the shift from victim consciousness into radical self-responsibility.
I like that because, and I mentioned something similar in the book that I wrote, Dancing in Hellfire, about how we're not a victim of something that happens to us until we choose to be.
Absolutely.
No matter how bad something is, there's almost always a way to be a beneficiary of that thing. And I was describing my childhood at the time and, you know, my mother being murdered and horrific things like that and being abused by alcoholic boyfriends and all of that. It's a horrible experience, but it's not fair to say that I was a victim of that because I gained a lot from that. Like, I'm extremely unwilling to enter into any sort of abusive relationship, and I don't tolerate those sorts of things in relationships. And I do a fair bit of advocacy, I guess, against domestic violence. I almost said for domestic violence. Obviously, I meant against domestic violence. And these are direct results of that. So rather than being a victim of those things and allowing them to impact me negatively, I use them to motivate me to do positive things.
Absolutely. I think some people get confused because you can be a genuine victim, right? Like people who are abused or whatever. But I think it's really in the shift from having that be your like carrying narrative for the rest of your life. And it's just like, I'm going to wear that like a badge and I'm, you know, a victim. Versus, yes, I was a victim in this situation, but I'm not going to let that, you know, be my entire life and my entire reality. Like, I'm going to rise above this situation. I'm going to learn from it. And yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't want to do. And it's something that a lot of people can't even comprehend, honestly.
And I don't want to be too stark about it because honestly and obviously, if you spent your entire childhood like being molested by your uncle, you're a victim of that.
Absolutely.
And I can't say that you can necessarily take that experience and turn it into something positive or even that you should. But I totally understand that it's not always that simple. And when you're a victim of something, it involves a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, and you have to heal from that before you can even begin to move forward and find a way to find some silver lining to it, I suppose.
Yeah. And even if there is no silver lining, I mean, like the big thing is just healing and like true healing that unfortunately a lot of people don't get to achieve. And it does take a lot of, when people say shadow work or like dark work, it takes a lot of that, like facing your demons head on and just taking that and figuring out how that has affected you.
If you hear that sound in the background, that is actually my dog panting. I've told her to go lay down twice, and she's just not having it. She's just super wound up right now. So sorry in advance. I think I hear it, but I don't think it's actually coming through the microphone, but I'm not entirely sure. So just getting that out of the way.
That's our third host.
Yeah, that
we
is
actually have
Aria.
5 hosts today.
Yeah.
You're including the cats.
Both cats have also come out. It's very strange.
Yeah.
But I have found forgiveness to be critical to this process of healing. And again, I was fortunate in this regard to have had a mother who was murdered, because I found as I grew older that the only way I could ever come to terms with that or have justice with that, with the fact that when I was 12 years old, my mother was just taken from me. Her body never found.
Wow.
And we've only been able to piece it together, unofficially since that almost certainly it was my aunt's ex-husband who beat her to death.
Jesus.
He beat another woman to death the month after my mother disappeared with a hammer so that he could steal $2,000 from her. Just horrible human being. Anyway, the only way to come to terms with that and find any justice, because sending this man to prison isn't going to do me any good. Having him put to death is not going to do me any good. None of that's going to bring my mother back. None of it's going to restore those years that I lost with my mother. The only way I could ever find any sort of peace with this situation is to forgive the man who did it. And ultimately, that's what I ended up doing. Mm-hmm. And that was how I sort of became an advocate of forgiveness in almost any and all circumstances. Now, it is key for forgiveness that you not have someone repeatedly doing that thing to you, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get confused by that because say if you have an abusive partner and it's like, oh, I forgive them and take them back. No.
Right.
You can, accept what they've done and also set that boundary to never associate with this person ever again.
Yes, and that would be critically important, I would suggest.
Yeah.
It's the Bible, of course, says that you should forgive someone, I think 77 times, 7 times, or it's some ridiculous number, and I don't necessarily agree with that. Of course, Jesus also said if a man strikes you, and we're not Christians on this show, but I realize most Americans are.
Yeah.
And I like to point to the Bible. A lot of it has really good teachings, like turn the other cheek. I'm fully in agreement with that idea of turning the other cheek. But I don't view it quite as liberally as Jesus did. For example, I only have 2 cheeks. If I turn one and then you slap the other, I'm striking back, right? I will forgive you for that first offense. But if you do it again, and I've made it clear, hey, that's not okay, I'm not going to put up with that, and you do it a second time, if you slap that cheek that I've turned, that's where there's really a problem.
Yeah.
But so you can't allow people to just repeatedly aggress against you, I don't think. And I experienced this. I lived this when I was running for sheriff in 2020 when my signs went missing from around Cheshire County. And the police contacted me and asked if I wanted anything done about it. And I said, no, I'm going to forgive it on this time. But I put this out there in a YouTube video and in other avenues that I had that were highly watched at the time, that I'm going to forgive it for this one time. But you better hope that no one else steals any of my signs or vandalizes any of my signs, because the police have your information. So you better be out there telling your friends, don't do this, because if any more of my signs go missing, I'm having the police drop the hammer on you. And I'm not a fan of using the police against people, but again, that's the society where we live in right now, where like I don't have any other recourse to do anything about this other than involving the police. And he is literally aggressing against my property in this case. And at that point, it becomes justified to defend yourself against that.
Self-defense. Yeah.
Right. So I would regrettably have involved the police at that time, but I was willing to forgive him for the first offenses.
Yeah.
But anything after that, like, no, dude. And like, I'm sorry if someone else now goes out there and steal my signs and you're going to be held responsible for it. But all I can tell you is go out there and beg people not to do it, because if it happens, you're on the hook. Mm-hmm. And that was what I said then, that I had only one cheek to turn. I will turn it. But if you also strike it, then
that's it.
The retaliation is coming.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
It's like you get one chance.
Unfortunately, a lot of Americans, many claiming to be Christians, aren't even willing to turn that first cheek, it would seem.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people in general just don't even really comprehend these concepts. And a lot of people who claim to be Christians are really not living by any of the teachings of the Bible, or I think a lot of people are living unconsciously. So they're kind of just like reacting to the things that are happening to them. And they're not really thinking things through. They're not like analyzing any sort of situations. Like if we got into an argument or something, I would sit down and I would think about it and, take my responsibility for whatever happened between us, and then, see if there were any lessons that I could gather.
But the key to that is when you're experiencing that argument, emotions are high. Right.
Yes.
The first step in any sort of situation like that is to get control of one's emotions.
Yeah. And which a lot of people can't do.
Then you can sit down and think about it and reflect on it and ask, okay, well, what did I do wrong? What did the other person do wrong? And what can we do to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again? How can we rebuild these bridges? This is why when I get into an argument with someone, I prefer to just extricate myself from the situation.
Yes,
I'll come back to this later. I realize you want to continue discussing it right now, but that's not going to be productive.
Take some time. Take a breather.
Take a breather. Yeah, everyone calm down and then come back and discuss it calmly, rationally as adults. But a lot of people don't do that. They don't believe, I think, that they can control their emotions.
I think a lot of people don't want to. I think a lot of people thrive on, or they think they thrive on the drama. Like they enjoy it. They like fighting. Like that Karen in the restaurant that's like verbally assaulting the waiter?
Yeah.
You think that lady wants to get control of her emotions? No, she loves it. She loves verbally assaulting people who have to take it. And I think a lot of people are just like that. Like, I don't know. It's giving them something that they're lacking elsewhere in their life,
You make a really good point, because a few weeks ago, I was upset with my boyfriend over something. I don't remember what. And it wasn't even a major thing. And I knew it would be very easy to just talk to him about it. And like we could very easily work it out and it wouldn't be a thing. But I didn't do that because I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I wanted to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a curious thing. But it happens. And I recognize that in myself, and this is why I didn't take it out on him. I just, lay down and stayed upset. And then the next morning I was fine. But it's such a curious thing that a person could actively want to feel badly about something.
But there's so much of that, right? Like when you're sad, you listen to the sad music and you know what I mean? Like people, that's a very common trend where it's like, no, I want to sit in my sadness. And I think to a certain degree, I think it's important for us to feel our emotions through to completion. And I don't think very many of us have been modeled that in healthy ways. So a lot of us are modeled like very toxic, abusive anger, or like not feeling our emotions in a productive way, right? But I think if you're sad, if you're mourning or something, it's important to like feel those emotions so you can process and integrate them, or else it just like becomes bottled up and it like kind of festers. Like when we're having especially negative emotions, I think it is important to process those in a healthy way. And I think that is going to look differently for everyone. I think typically like some like quiet, mindful reflection is usually a good idea.
I would like to think that's what it was. I haven't really given that much thought about why I wanted to feel negatively, but it could very well have been that I just wanted to see the emotions through to the end. Or it could have just been some sort of weird sadistic, or I guess masochistic, or I guess both, really. Some weird sadomasochistic, joy out of making myself feel bad, because I was making myself feel bad.
Yeah.
My boyfriend hadn't done anything.
Yeah.
And I knew that, and I never blamed him for doing anything. I was just upset with him about this thing. But that's how emotions are. No one can make you feel anything.
And isn't that, I think that's a wild thing too, where it's like, no, you are responsible for your own emotions and your own responses and reactions. So it's like, I can't say Aria made me feel bad. That's
Right.
impossible. I made me feel bad. You might have said something to me. You might have said like, oh, your shirt's ugly or whatever, even if it's something that is, rude. It's still, I've literally been insulted and I thought it was funny, and it almost it gave me a little
Right.
chuckle and like almost brought me joy in a weird way. So, you know what I mean? It's really up to us on how we react to things.
It ultimately comes down to power as well, right?
And freedom, right?
It does. And I would not want to give someone the power to control my emotional state. Mm-hmm. That to me is dangerous. That leaves you open to being manipulated. If I can make you angry, then I can manipulate you.
Absolutely.
If I can make you sad or happy or whatever, then all I have to do is figure out what actions are causing you to feel the ways that I want you to feel, and I can manipulate you into doing whatever it is that I want you to do. Now, I'm not a manipulative person. However, people who run for office do tend to be
Yep.
highly manipulative, and they have this enormous apparatus that is designed to make you or to encourage you to feel certain ways. I almost said to make you feel certain ways, but of course they can't make you feel those ways, but they know what is likely to stimulate you
Yeah.
into a certain response.
Yeah, pull on the heartstrings
Yeah.
and whatnot.
And they're really, really good at that. Like I posted earlier today that your enemy, if you're a Republican, then you know beyond any doubt that the Democrats are the bad guys. And if you're a Democrat, then you know beyond any doubt whatsoever that the Republicans are the bad guys. When the truth is, they're both the bad guys.
Yeah.
And they have just mastered the art of manipulating you into believing that the other sides are the problems. And it didn't even make it to the third comment before a Republican came along and said, no, the Democrats are really the bad guys.
And you're like, see, thank
Yeah,
you for
right.
proving my point, sir.
It saddens me to see how easily people are allowing themselves to be controlled. And it all comes back to not having that ability to self-reflect and not having that ability to control their emotions. And that's why I think what you posted resonated with me so much, because anytime something happens, we do get to control
Yeah.
our response to it. You may not get to control how you instantly react to that, right? You may not get to control your instant emotion. Like if someone slaps me, I'm going to be angry.
Yeah.
And it's maybe even be fair to say that they made me angry. But what I do in response to that, when I feel angry, if I lash back out or if I strike back, that's 100% on me. What I allow my emotions to motivate me to do is 100% my responsibility,
Yeah.
as is controlling those emotions and causing myself to feel another way. Most people don't view it that way. But if something happens to me, if, for example, someone hits me, I do have a choice on how to react to that. Anytime something happens to you, the listener, you have a choice on how to react to that. And it's not always easy to make that choice to forgive. It's so much more rewarding to lash back out. It's so much more rewarding to just be angry. And I don't know why it is, but I'm guilty of this too. Like I said, I wanted to be upset last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever it was. So I understand where people are coming from. It was difficult. It would have been harder to reach out to my boyfriend and say, look, I'm upset and it's because of this. And like, I don't want to be upset about it anymore. That would have been the adult, rational way to go about doing it. In theory, I mean, it wasn't causing problems in our relationship anyway, so like it wasn't affecting him or
Yeah, and
causing
it
any
seems
sort of,
like you got over it the
Yeah.
next day too. But I think an important thing to note, especially, I mean, within like any sort of relationships, like friendships or remote romantic relationships, when we like reveal those things to the other person and like open up that conversation about it, it does create like deeper connections and more intimacy in relationships when it's like, here's a vulnerable share for me. Right?
Oh,
Like
that's a
I'm
good
I'm
point.
upset about this for whatever reason. Maybe it triggered something from your past or like whatever it is. And it does, I mean, you know, even if you got over it and it didn't cause problems, I think sometimes like those vulnerable shares can like really bring people together. But it's so vulnerable. And sometimes, like a lot of the times, I'm not even ready for that. Like it's easier to just like be upset about it or ignore it. Yeah, it can be really hard to like bring that to the table. And then you also like can't control how the other person reacts, you know? So
also true. But you posted this because of something that happened in your life.
Yeah.
And we discussed whether or not you were comfortable sharing that. And I suppose to some extent you are. And it's quite a compelling series of events. And there were
Yeah.
a lot of stakes here with a lot of money and property that was effectively on the line. So do you mind sharing
Yeah,
that with us?
absolutely. So I actually made a post in a Facebook group about this situation because this situation was causing me so much like strain in my life. Like I was just suffering at the effect of this situation and this person, right? So long story short, a woman that I used to be business partners with effectively stole a car from us and owes me a large amount of money.
By us, you mean you and your husband?
Yeah, me and my husband. It's technically my husband's car, and it's money that she owes me per our agreement for work that I did and also money that I lent her. So so essentially I had asked her multiple times to start paying me back and to return the car, and there was always an excuse. And then, you know, finally I, you know, asked again and she ghosted me. And still to this day, it's been maybe 8 months, still has not responded to
Wow.
me. I have reached out to her many times. I have,
Now, obviously, she has your husband's car. at
yeah,
this
she
point,
has
right?
she has our property, his car at her house. I mean, I can understand maybe not paying me back the money. Even that is obviously an immoral thing to do. Like that's not like you're stealing from people
Right.
and breaking agreements. But to like straight up have somebody's car and refuse to bring it back and make that right is really insane. So obviously for a very, very long time, I was so angry about this situation.
And you didn't consider involving the police to get the vehicle?
Yeah, so when I made that, I made a Facebook status sharing this whole situation in a group. It was like a business women's group. And I'm like, listen, and it was also a spiritual group. So I was like, I want to reach out to these women to see, you know, I'm just suffering about this. And I just want to heal from this. Like, how do I heal from this? So I made that post kind of asking for their perspectives. And overwhelmingly, I've got dozens of comments that were like, get a lawyer, call the police, take her to court. And it was very much like that sort of like retaliatory response. So like, yeah, you got to call the cops. This is crazy. And of course, I'm not involving the police. Some people were like, you could call a tow truck company and get it repoed. Some of my friends were like, I'll go there with Matt and we'll repo the car together and we'll just show up on her doorstep. And really, I could even recognize at that point in my journey that wasn't going to cause me any healing. I mean, it would get the car back and that would be good. That's like one less thing I had to worry about, right? But that wasn't really the root of my suffering.
Was the root of your suffering that this was a friend, someone you trusted who had ultimately betrayed that trust?
Yeah, so I was very angry for a long time, and then that was another flavor that I was trying on, was being very just sad and one hurt that someone would betray me that way and take advantage of my kindness and my husband's kindness. I felt guilty that I involved my husband with it. And of course he was, like a willing participant, like lent her the car. I didn't like convince him or anything, but I still felt guilty that he was also wrapped up in it. And yeah, I just felt so much sadness about our severed friendship. And yeah, I felt a lot of like a wide range of like negative emotions about this situation. And it was very hurtful to have someone that I cared about deeply do this to me. I mean, yeah, like do this to me, right? To steal from me and whatever. So, I asked in that Facebook group. I didn't really get the answers that I was looking for. Like, I'm looking for like deeper healing here. And so I started a online midwifery school, year-long program, and the first quarter is focused on what my mentor dubs the self-mastery tools. In this tools, so in the school, getting back to the Facebook status, I wrote that kind of like inspired this episode's topic was how is this situation for me instead of like why did this happen to me? So moving from victim consciousness into like radical responsibility. And that was truly the thing that brought me healing from this situation. So I was able to, one, eat my projections. So where I was judging her, I was able to reflect that back on myself like a mirror and see, okay, where do I see these things in myself? Which might not sound important, but it actually is very important for like that healing aspect. And
can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by eating
yeah,
your projections?
So for this woman is habitually late, right? So like 45 minutes late to every appointment. And that was something I was constantly complaining about, like, oh, she's late, whatever. So, okay, can I see where I'm late sometimes?
Okay.
Or so maybe if I'm never late, right? So I think she's like an irresponsible business owner. Can I see where I might perceive myself as an irresponsible business owner? And not only does that give me the ability to like forgive her and understand her, but it also gives myself, because deep down inside, when we're judging other people, we're really judging ourselves.
Right.
And I think that's a very like edgy thing for some people to try on. But so I was judging myself. And then in turn, when I was able to like forgive those things in her and see those things in her, I was able to forgive and love and accept those things within myself. So that in and of itself brought me like very deep self-healing.
And I imagine it would also make it somewhat easier to forgive her because by identifying these things that you're mad at her about and seeing those very same things within yourself, it sort of strengthens an empathic bond between you where, as you mentioned, you become more understanding of why she might have made those choices or why she may have had those habits.
Yeah. And another really powerful tool that I used was accepting my responsibility in the situation. So looking at it, how did I co-create this situation? And sometimes that's hard to do. Like if somebody breaks into your house and like robs you, that's kind of hard to do. But in this situation, it was easy for me to see, well, I lent her money. I didn't ask her to start paying me back sooner. And yes, I do think she took advantage of my kindness and was definitely, like in the wrong here. But I was also able to fully take my responsibility and learn from that. And, how am I going to do this different in other business relationships or just other relationships in general? Maybe, you're going to have a little bit better credit if I'm going to loan someone money, things like that. And really I was able to come to a point where instead of me just being like angry at her and seeing her as the villain and suffering and I'm the victim and why did she do this to me, I was able to like really sit down and just say, there's so many lessons here for me to take. I'm growing so much as a business owner, as a midwife, as a human being from this situation. And now I'm able to see her and just have softness for her. And, instead of that, like that anger and that rage before, anytime I would think of her, like literally if I thought of her, I would just be like instantly angry and triggered. And now I can just see, some of the qualities in her that I admire and respect. And it's brought me some serious peace in my heart. And really, for anyone that's in a conflict right now, I wish that for them so much.
Absolutely.
Like, there is nothing more powerful and more freeing than just having, like, not being a victim of situations and, like, not being at the effect of. It has just been so freeing for me to be able to just be, like, relieved of this anguish, like, seriously.
Yeah, to be able to let it go and move forward. That's an amazing, powerful sentiment.
Yeah.
And I like that you use the word villain there, because that word encapsulates so much. You said that you stopped seeing her as a villain, and I think that's what a lot of people do. They dehumanize the people they're angry at or the people who have wronged them or whatever, and they do take on this unrealistic, larger than life villain mindset where you can't forgive them for that because they're no longer a person who did something bad. They're the devil.
Yeah.
And you can't forgive the devil. And I think that's a tool that people use, or maybe not even on purpose, but it's a way people have of not allowing themselves to come to terms with things and to forgive people for the things that they've done.
Yeah. And it's crazy. As like, so I've said this to so many people and they just can't even believe it, but I've totally come to terms with the facts that I'm probably never going to see that money and we're probably never going to see the car ever again. And to some people, they're like, whoa, you're just going to let her like not take responsibility, or like you're just going to let her effectively rob you. And to me, like my takeaway from it was, well, like there's clearly, unless I want to involve the cops, like there's nothing I can do to force her to like return the car,
right,
or like without aggressing on her. Like there's really no way for me to like get those things back. And at the end of the day, it's actually just the price I had to pay to get these lessons and to learn this and to also like not have to deal with her anymore.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned that that's such a strange way for people to look at it. You're just going to let this person rob you? Like, no, it's done at this point. You have
what
been
am I
robbed.
going to do? That's
right?
like if somebody broke into my house and robbed me, they're going to be like, well, you're not going to go like hunt him down, like
Right.
Dog the Bounty Hunter style? No, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I can't I'm just not willing to do that.
And, I mean, at a certain point, you got to cut your losses. And, I mean, be thankful that it wasn't worse, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's always better to move on if that's feasibly an option. And in this case, it sounds like it is. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
$3,000 in a vehicle to cut a toxic person out of your life and to learn some valuable lessons through the act of doing so. So it's a steep price to pay, but every lesson that we learn throughout our lives is going to come with a little bit of blood attached to it, unfortunately. But I think that's a good takeaway, and I think this is probably one of the episodes I'm going to look back on and be most proud of. So thank you for sharing the story with us, Nikki. It was absolutely fantastic. Forgive one another is the most important little piece of advice I could throw out there for people. Control your emotions, obviously. Reflect on things. Ask yourself what you've done to contribute to the situation, because that's challenging, right? Like if you've been victimized in some way, it's really, really challenging. And I'm not saying you deserved it when you were wearing that mini skirt, you were sexually assaulted, but like I'm just saying, in a lot of cases, there are some things that we did to contribute to that situation. Like you did choose to loan that money. And in countless examples that I could bring up in the past, I chose to do something that I didn't have to do and that ultimately bit me in the ass. And I look back and I want to be mad at the person, but I was the one who chose to do this.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing. That is, as you mentioned, radical responsibility. Truly taking responsibility for your own actions, even when someone else has wronged you. But it's critically important to do so. So thank you for listening. Subscribe over on freetalkcast.com. I'm proud to say that you can find us now just about everywhere. You can find Free Talk Cast. It's even on iTunes directly now. It's on YouTube. I'm going to put it on the LRN YouTube channel soon, because right now I just put it on mine because I was unsure how that entire process was going to work. But ultimately what it did was put it on my YouTube channel, and I don't want that. I want it on the LRN YouTube channel, because that makes a lot more sense since it's LRN that's producing Free Talk Cast. So thank you for listening. Head on over to freetalkcast.com. There's links to our Patreon there, and I'd rather you subscribe there than anywhere else. Thank you for listening, and thank you for forgiving one another, and good luck. By the time you're listening to this, we already know who has won the presidency. I am proud to say I did not vote.
Me either.
I had promised to vote for whoever would promise to pardon Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht, and Edward Snowden. And of course, Donald Trump did not do those things.
Nope.
He did promise to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence. And because of that, I intended to vote for Donald Trump until the day came today. And as soon as we finish this, I'm going right back to the hospital to be with my boyfriend. And I'm sorry to Donald Trump or whatever other politicians may or may not have wanted my vote that I was going to give, but my boyfriend's more important to me than you are. So he's more important to me than Donald Trump, and I don't even feel remotely bad for saying that. So I didn't vote, so I get to walk away from this with a clean conscience. So I guess I should thank my boyfriend for that.
Yeah, and I just don't vote. So I believe it's an act of aggression on your neighbors. And no judgment for people who do vote. Like, I understand the concept of voting in self-defense.
Right, but it
to
is
each
an
their
act of
own.
aggression.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a tricky situation, but it is an act of aggression. But thank you for listening, and good luck whoever has won the presidency.